All right. Well, why don't we talk about uh, some of the events of the last week, and then we can kind of talk about why it's important for us, and why it has a meaning for us. And so I thought we maybe would start like something like that, just to kind of look at some of the things that we find very interesting, and then we can, talk about those. One of the big things is that's bothering us is the lack of freedom that we're experiencing on in every area, that keeps happening. And also, for us, like people really have no say in anything what's going on. And it just feels like the small group of people is, kind of governing all the events or all the direction without really, asking people where they want to go, what do they want. And this is nothing new. This has been going for, as far as we can remember with humanity, except now we can really see it in a documented form, right in a live, live stream as it's happening at the moment. So that's kind of what some of the thoughts that I'm having. So I wonder how that kind of resonates with you.
One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about recently, because of just how easy it is to like go back and see when all these clips of like Biden or whatever other politician saying one thing now and they were saying something completely different, like not very long ago or 20 years ago or whatever the case may be. And then I think of 1984 when George Orwell went to like a painstaking effort to describe the entire function of government that rewrites news as it happens, so that the government was never wrong. Kind of in the past, they rewrite what the narrative actually was, so that it matches what the current narrative is. And it's really kind of like a pervasive
Right.
idea in 1984. And one of those things that when you're growing up, especially kind of as this technology is like emerging, and you read a book like 1984 that positions it that way, and there is someone who wants to have that kind of power. There is. It was so easy to think, well, that's exactly what our future is going to be like. And then I'm dumbfounded that that's not what's happened, and yet they still get away with it. And by that I mean,
Right.
that's like they aren't going back and scrubbing. Like, they try. Some people try to scrub stuff up on the internet or whatever, but effectively the internet has become the lifetime memory of humanity. So if it's out there once, it's out there forever. And there's no like pretending that you didn't do it and crawling it back. And it has literally not changed the narrative for politicians at all. Like, I grew up thinking they would have to now at least stand by what they say. No, they don't. They would at least now have to own up to when they've completely flip-flopped. No, they don't. Like, there's zero
Right.
accountability, even though all of the evidence is right there. And it's kind of frustrating. Yeah.
I think that I think those events that keeps happening right now really showing clearly that we don't have the system that would hold people accountable, and it's been becoming so obvious now. And I think that that kind of creates kind of the sense of, you know, it projects into everything now, because people think, I believe, if they see the politicians and business people getting away with all those things, not being accountable, then I think kind of sets general tone for being basically for everybody. Well, we don't have to be accountable, you know. And it's very interesting to see those things. Like, I wanted to talk to you about one of the things that really fascinated me was that last presidential debate that we had. And I don't know if you had a chance to watch it or not.
No, not all of it. Like I don't have and that's gonna have to change. Like I'm just gonna need to start investing a little bit more time looking into the topics that we want to discuss, so that I'm a bit more prepared for it. But especially things like the debate, it was difficult because I'd seen one clip where the debate moderator said something to the effect to Vivek of, that's enough. We ask the questions here, you don't. And I'm trying to think back to like any debate that I've ever watched in my entire life where the people on the stage aren't allowed to pose questions in the nature of the debate. Like they pretend this is a debate when this is effectively a town hall or something. Like this isn't a debate if you're not going to allow the people that are on stage to go back and forth about a subject. And that includes posing a question to the other one. It just seems like, okay, so then we're not watching a debate here. We're just watching pre-scripted time for each of the candidates to just say something on message for their campaign. That's not really a debate, not a substantive discussion about the topics, right?
I was thinking exactly the same thing. There was a first debate where they didn't allow really any type of debating back and forward. It was just basically straightforward questions, and you had to answer those questions. But what was just so interesting that just when I was almost giving up on Vivek, start trusting that he really maybe really wants to make a difference in anything, his performance was just incredible. He just from the beginning just totally unleashed wrath on the moderators and also on the RNC and the leader that I forgot her name now of the RNC and the other candidates. It was, and so many interesting things came out of it that was kind of shocking, be honest with you, and too bad you didn't watch it because you could talk more about it. What was kind of one of the things that I found very interesting, there is something called PBT or PDT podcast. It's like four guys or something. They have a.
I was going to mention that. Valuetainment,
right,
and I was going to mention his conversation on that.
So they had, the review, they were reviewing the debate, and they were very much aligned with our opinion about, and they all kind of, they had their own poll that they were running that was like 140,000 people in it, involved. And 80% people voted Vivek as a winner and of the debate. Okay?
Right.
And they agree on that. They were really impressed with all the things that he was saying and how he was handling other candidates. And then they were talking about how mainstream media, criticized Vivek as the biggest loser of the debate. And the winner of the debate was Nikki Haley. And the only reason that she won the debate was because she told Vivek that he's a scum.
Right? Like the most petulant
or not.
Yeah, the most petulant, unprofessional, like not addressing the substance of the criticism comment that you could get from the debate. Oh yeah, that's what made her win. Yeah. No, it was
right.
I like the other guys on it. I'm not as sure about all of their, like I don't know enough about some of the other guys, but oh my god, I always forget his name. Patrick Bet David, is that what is? The gentleman that we were talking about though, that I love that guy. I seem to be in alignment quite often with his values. He definitely has a much better understanding of the interplay between like high level business and government, because he's rich and is a very successful businessman and understand things that I kind of like probably oversimplify, because I take an approach from a very like philosophical objectivist outlook of something. I look at something and I just kind of like paint it black and white. But I really do appreciate like a lot of the nuance that he adds to a conversation. One of the things that I wanted to bring up about the debate, because there's also an argument for all of these debates, regardless of who you think won. There's a bunch of people out there that say the winner of each of these debates so far has been Trump, because he doesn't show up and his ratings continue to climb, which is kind of an interesting.
Of course, I mean, he's a winner. I'm talking about the people participating in the debate, you know?
Yeah, no, yes. I know. But one of the things that I thought was a little enlightening again about Vivek, from what I did see in the debate, that I think is relevant to talk about. And I remember I clipped a little bit of it and sent it to you. And that's, again, like from a personality type, I adore Vivek. I think he's a great guy. I think he would make a fantastic president if it got that far, even if I don't 100% agree with everything, right? Like I still think that there's a lot of potential there. But there's definitely places that I think you and I would both completely disagree. Prometheus, stop. There's probably a couple of places where you and I wouldn't agree with Vivek on, and he's kind of like shown some of those traits earlier, and it's some of that you mentioned earlier, like you're finally glad that you can like the guy again, because there was a couple of things that were a bit concerning. His take on Taiwan, his take on a couple of other things, Israel. And in the debate, he transitions from really pointing out a serious flaw with the Republican Party or with the media and with the government as a whole, and then parlays that or segues that into basically making a statement that the United States government should do more. He was talking about the nature of TikTok, right? And information on TikTok being sold to China, and that the government should ban TikTok from doing that. And he says, oh, that doesn't go far enough. We need to ban any company selling American data to China. Ban it. And it's like that. I don't understand the rationalization that he would have to jump through to at one point say that he's standing for freedom and the individual rights of his constituents and the people that he's fighting for, and how much the federal government has pushed against our rights, and then to make a claim that the government should have broad stroking ability to tell individual citizens what they can and can't do with their legally acquired data. We're not talking about illegally acquired data. That's not what we're talking about. If an American signs up for an app and they agree to sell their data in the terms of service, and then that company wants to sell that data to China, I don't understand how the government should, in a truly free capitalist system, have the right to tell an American citizen, no, you're not allowed to sell it to them. We're not talking about like illegally acquired data. We're not talking about military secrets. If we are, that's a whole different conversation. Like, treason is treason. If you're selling military secrets to a foreign nation, that's a different thing. What we're talking about is data brokerages who are amassing data through data mining or whatever fully legal way that they're doing it, that we all dislike, but people are doing it. You know, how does the government have the right to tell any American citizen what they can and can't do with that data? That's what kills me. So it just kind of like shows that as much as he seems to be small government, he has these like big established, what I would call a flaw in the way that. Anyway, I'm rambling too long. What's your take on that?
Yes. Remember Marshall said 40 words or less.
Yeah, I know. I pontificate that.
It's a good point. I didn't think about it when when he mentioned it, because I more saw it as a protection for people. I think it opens more the question why we allow it for anybody to collect your data in the first place. I think that your privacy should be, absolute, and none of those companies, including governments, nobody should have a right to collect any of your private information except for them to conduct their business when you need to process the transaction, or it's a kind of institution that you have to provide the data because they provide service to you, like social administration or something. But they should only always require the minimum of the data from you to conduct their business, and they should have no right in any way to resell it somewhere else, in my opinion. I cannot see any kind of way around that.
But
because it's my data,
why?
it should not be for sale anyway.
It's not your data though. The data is about you, but it's not yours. You didn't compile the data. You didn't tabulate it. You didn't make it useful by doing something with the data other than leaving it in a spreadsheet somewhere. And I'm just being devil's advocate. Well, I want privacy as well, but I also recognize that the Constitution of the United States, as much as we like to hearken to this idea of privacy, there is no right to privacy. There's right to private property. There's a whole bunch of established rights that we can and should talk about, but the notion that privacy is a right is a misnomer. There's a lot of things in the Constitution that would protect your ability to keep things private if you exercise your fundamental rights in order to do that. But there isn't like a right to privacy. That's not. If I go out on a public street, I can't tell someone you're not allowed to film me.
I heard, yes, I heard you, yes. Yes, when you think about it this way, yes, there's no rules for it right now, or there's no really laws or rules about it, but I wish there would be, in terms that you have a choice, again, to deal with the companies that would, choose not to sell your data. And you have a right to choose between a company that does sell your data and a company that doesn't sell your data. But we don't have that right now, so we don't really have a choice, and became the accepted norm that those companies can sell your data. But I wish there would be an option that there would be that people will be protected and their data will be protected and not abused and used for all sorts of purposes out there.
I don't understand how we don't already have those protections, though. I'm not forced to sign up for a particular web service. I'm also not forced to agree to their terms of service. I'm also not forced to not read them, like 99% of humans do when they agree to something on a website or the use of a service or something like that. Like this comes back to something that you mentioned earlier, which is personal accountability. Like, people should be accountable. I'm not saying this to like say I would appreciate a business that wants to sell my data. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is they have the right to do that if they're the one that's acquiring that data. And if I've agreed to a terms of service that says that they can sell it. The problem is that nobody reads the terms of service. Yes, there's also an argument to say there's a whole school of legalese written just to try and not let you be able to understand what you're agreeing to. And that's a whole different thing. But then you have the choice of getting a lawyer to look at the terms of service before you agree to something. Like, all of this comes down to, we make choices to engage in services that are not a right. And if we're going to engage in those services and click, I agree to the terms of service, and in that terms of service, they say, we're going to mine the shit out of your data and we're going to sell it, then it's on you for giving your data that you hold privately, for whatever that notion is, to use Facebook. If you want to use Facebook, you better assume they're going to sell your data. And there are platforms out there who intentionally will not sell your data. They're not very successful platforms. That's the problem. Everyone wants to use Facebook. Nobody seems to care that they're going to sell your data. So there's two conversations that we'd have to have. It's like, is there a tactic that we could create a platform that would actually encourage people to go to that where it doesn't sell your data? Sure. But is there like a legal reason why we should be asking the government from banning people from selling our data? No, because that's not American.
You have I wish you would have an option that there would be media enough that you could choose, not have a monopoly right now. Between 3 or 4 media, but they basically control everything. So unfortunately, you don't have that option. But I wish there would be enough competition out there, and the gold standard would be that you can choose between companies that sell your data and don't sell your data. But you don't have that option nowadays. There's very few companies that have that option, if any, and you don't have the option really to use different media because there are none available, hardly any. So unfortunately, it's kind of gray area right now. But so I understand your point of view. I wish there would be different options, but it is where it is at the moment. But one of the things I want to talk about, so I don't want to get off track don't lose the train of thought with that podcasting and the Vivek. And what I want to follow up on that podcast people also invited the day after debate Vivek to talk to him.
Yeah.
And they had a podcast with him about what happened at the election and what his take is. And that part really scared me. Again, because it showed how the system we have right now and the people in the power and the institutions basically have such a control that there is very hard for anybody to make changes. And he's fortunate in one aspect that he, doesn't need the money of the establishment right now. He said he put like 18 million of his dollar in, but he's worth something like, I forgot, was it 800 million or something? So he can afford it, but pretty much no other candidate could do that. But so that part really scared me when he showed how the establishment on both sides, the Republican and Democratic, now really kind of showed, his vision, and also showed that he's smart and he's opening the subject that nobody else wants to touch. How quickly the Republican establishment turned against him, and how quickly, suddenly he's falling in the polls. Like, it's like saying, well, he's polling at 4%, and Nikki Haley's polling like, I don't know, like as a second, highest after Trump or something. How is that even possible? And he talks about, of course,
because again,
the money that the establishment puts forward.
Or the polls,
but it's sad. It's scary and sad.
The polls that are generating these kinds of results, as we've talked in the past, are just going to be geared in a way to net that result. The survey that you're saying that the Valuetainment guys ran that showed 80% of people thought Vivek won the debate is indicative. It's also not 100%. They have a specific audience. They have a biased audience. So that poll is going to be exposed to people who are more predisposed to agreeing with what they're saying. So they are going to think Vivek won. But likewise, the polls that are run out there, they're done in very small sample groups, gerrymandered, for lack of a better word, sample groups, where the companies that are running these surveys know which samples to really, really tag in on if they're trying to push the results of the survey in a specific direction. And I've worked for these companies. I know this happens. And there will be leading questions. For example, first one that I can think of is, you would ask a leading question such as, did you watch the debate on one of the main news things. So you're asking them, did you watch it on Fox and MSNBC, wherever it's actually coverage of it is actually shown on a major news thing. And if they don't say yes to that, then they're not going to be asked further questions. So anybody who watched coverage of the debate on the Valuetainment podcast or, you know what I mean? Like in some other way, they're not even going to be included in the sample size because the questions are geared to kind of get them out of it. So now you have a pool of people who only watched the debate from CNN's point of view or MSNBC's point of view. And of course, their interpretation of how that is going to be done is not just the debate, but all of the replay videos and commentary from the newscasters and the spin that the news organization is putting on it. And do you think of that population, 4% of people thought Vivek is going to do well? Yeah, probably. It's probably a low percentage because those news organizations are painting him in a negative light, right? So anyway, it's just one of those things. Like, yeah, they can say this poll, look, Vivek is doing poorly. Well, what's the nature of why he's doing? What questions were asked that really like geared that sample size towards saying that he's doing so poorly? When you look on social media and you look at a lot of other popular avenues of discussing politics, and people are saying, I don't think anyone is saying, oh, he's going to beat Trump. No one's that delusional, but no one's pretending like he's not kicking people's ass and getting really, really good poll results and having a lot of like grassroots following for Vivek. Because even people like forever Trumpers seem to like this guy, right? They all hate DeSantis now because Trump's done a good job of you know what I mean? But like Trump's not talking shit about Vivek. So, and Vivek is saying sensible things, conservative, fiscally conservative, socially conservative things that the base is going to like. And he does, you know, do a pretty good job of kissing Trump's ass when necessary, without Vivek going against his morals and failing to point out where he might have done something differently. He does that, but he also talks Trump up whenever it's appropriate. So it's like, do I think he's really only going to get 4% of the vote? Well, probably not. Like, that doesn't seem like an accurate poll to me. But anyway, that's just my opinion, you know?
Let's hope so.
So there was an interesting conversation
I guess that.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, it was just the same thing when there were. I didn't watch the whole clip. I watched a couple of the whole podcast with him on the Valuetainment guys. But I watched a couple of clips that they put out about that. So kind of the different points in the discussion. And there was the part where they were discussing kind of vice presidents, like who would they nominate? They were kind of discussing, you know, like people were asking Trump about Tucker being vice presidential running mate with him, and what do people think of that, and those kinds of things. And I thought that was kind of an interesting conversation because it's interesting to see his point of view on like the different roles that a vice president should or could serve. And it's kind of irrelevant to what your policy is or any of those kinds of things. It was just interesting. It was one of the clips that I'd seen. So he was talking about how, you know, you kind of have someone like Tucker, where he was saying Tucker could be a very, very interesting running mate because he really has a tap onto like kind of like the for lack of a better word, I think this is the term he used, like kind of like spiritual consciousness of America, you know? And that's fluffy words for saying like he'd be a good person to kind of run things by and get a genuine like reaction from that, you know, would be in line with a substantial amount of the American population. It's like that would be a pretty good use of a vice president, right? And it was just an interesting conversation. So you watched the whole podcast though, did you?
Yes.
Do you remember that part of the podcast? And can you give me your thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. You know, I thought it was very interesting. I just, you know, I think that after Trump, Tucker Carlson might be the second most hated person against Democrats, you know. So yes. It's kind of interesting.
I'll interrupt real quick.
choice.
I'll interrupt real quick just to say that I was thinking last night how thankful I am that Fox got rid of Tucker, because I've always liked Tucker, but I've always kind of felt that he was tainted by, he still worked for Fox. Like he was on a network that I dislike Fox as much as I dislike CNN. Like I don't fall into this like, oh, they're better. No. They've done some pretty fucked up things over the years. But I always kind of felt like I liked Tucker. And now it just feels like, oh, you can really get to know Tucker and just like him. That's the Tucker that isn't weighted down by like what the network is expecting him to say or any of those kinds of things. So I've been really enjoying like getting to know Tucker in the way that a lot of people didn't have the opportunity to before, like myself, because they weren't going to just watch Fox just to see him. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But anyway,
yes.
So go ahead with your thoughts on that part of the podcast you watched.
One of the things that also is interesting that Vivek actually was the first thing he brought up is why the Republicans keep losing all these local elections and stuff, And this is something I think we talked about before, that there seems to be such a organization, I don't know who's behind it, but I see such a powerful movement on Democrat side to capture basically all the institutions from the ground up, even the small positions in a different legal system, different local governments. And then that seems to give them power to keep, winning the elections in many different areas. That's why, we're supposed to have that big wave, Republican wave, last year or something, and it was totally washed out, just because of that. And it's happening again, now. And Vivek pointed to it basically, and I almost admire, and I would love to know who are those brains behind the Democratic Party that managed to organize that so smoothly, and which also gave them, who was behind organizing that they they stole the election, in my opinion. They managed to do that. And it's just, I would love to meet those people because they seem to be as bright as Vivek, except they work somehow behind the veil that we don't see.
Right.
No, I was, talking about how, and Vivek mentioned that the Democratic Party seems to be very organized, and somehow, you have this brain that keeps running it, that they somehow keep appointing people at a low level into both the government and judicial system, and somehow they're finding a way to do it. I know they talk about Soros and stuff to funding some of those people, but somehow they're finding a way to appoint people in those positions, and then it kind of projects, when it comes even to the bigger election, like, we were waiting for the wave last year to happen for Republicans. It didn't really happen. And it keeps happening in the last few years. We always think that, the election that's going to come, the Democrats going to be like totally crushed, and they end up not being crushed or even winning. And like that Fetterman guy, how did he even get elected, somebody like that, into the government? How those people keep winning? It just kind of blows my mind, who's behind that. I would love to meet those people because they seem to be very smart. You just don't know who they are.
Like that.
But somehow they manage to steal election and keep voting people in that, eventually always leaves them in control somehow.
Fetterman's almost a good example of, like, I think what Vivek was pointing out. It's like there must have been some pretty questionable choices made to decide that someone as unlikable, let's just say, as Dr. Oz, his being successful and having his own audience is not the same thing as on a political stage being likable. He was not. Like, who made the decision that the guy that probably had a bunch of money to put up to the RNC, and for that reason only, probably, like, what other reason would you have to run someone like that against Fetterman when, you know, if you're looking at it from Democrat versus conservative, the idea of a guy like Fetterman winning in a situation like that is like extra destructive because of the position he's in. This isn't just like a congressional representative. This is one of very few Senate seats. The Senate's a whole different beast than Congress, because each state only gets 2. It's a very important political position. Do you know what I mean? It's like you don't put that up against someone like. Anyway, it's just, he pointed out, there's like, what kind of decisions are being made at the RNC level when you have all this money being dumped into what you should be making like high level strategic decisions, and then one of those strategies that's in, let's run Dr. Oz, a not politician, against Fetterman, and then lose really badly. How do you lose against someone like that? It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and it's just, and even more sad. Like, you know, we talk about it when you see those elections happening in House and they vote on some issues, okay, and Democrats, pretty much everyone, they always align along the party lines, 100% Democrats. Republicans, they don't. There's always a bunch of Republicans that sabotage anything they want to do. Even though they have more people, they could actually win because they have a majority in many of those decisions. There's always enough of them that they sabotage it and don't go along with the thing. Now I've been hearing just, over the weekend that the new speaker now starts to talk about they're not going to impeach Biden.
Oh, really?
So it's like, what? After all this, you're not going to do anything about it? So again,
I haven't heard anything about that. I'd be curious to see how he gets away with that.
Yes, he just started talking about we don't have enough concrete evidence to actually do the impeachment. So it's pretty scary if that's true, that it's going to happen, and they're talking about, of course, the podcasters talk about, that's the smart decision on the Republican Party because they want Biden to run. They don't want to be impeached and have somebody else replace him. They want him to run, so they're not going to do it. So he will run, against whoever is going to be nominated. You know what I mean? Because he's so incompetent in their opinion, But if that
there
really
also
happens,
might be
it makes me lose any faith.
That's like a lot of times, for me to say, a lot of times, like, so my gut reaction, I'd be curious to get what your gut reaction is, though I don't think it will be as scathing as mine, is that, like, representatives like Marjorie Taylor Greene, I really don't like her. Like, I really just don't. I understand what she's trying to do, and I understand she tries to, like, stand by that she's principled in her decisions. But it also kind of feels like, how do I articulate this fairly? Like, I like to think that the purpose in government and Congress and having, like, internal debates and discussions and raising motions and things like that would be a productive use of time and wouldn't come off as a bunch of like petulant high schoolers just trying to like tattletale on each other or find it a reason to like do what the other party did to them. And I know people might not agree with me, especially people that really, really like her, but that's the way she comes off. Not just her, lots of other people and plenty of Democrats. So I'm not just saying this about a Republican and pretending that it's one that she's just an example. It's like, I've seen so many clips in the last couple of weeks of her bringing forward to drop people's salaries down to $1 and censure people and do all these kinds of things. And it's like, it just feels like there's a much better use of government time that we're paying them to do than to do those things. So it's just an example of like, of kind of how, I don't know where I'm going with it, but it just feels very like, I look at Canadian politics and laugh, because Canadian politics is literally just both sides standing in Parliament with a fucking speaker in the middle, basically letting people throw insults back and forth. They don't get anything done. They literally just try and throw insults back and forth, and then the day is done and they all go home. And that's what the U.S. Congress is starting to feel like more and more to me. What's your reaction?
See, I have totally different opinion on that in terms of, Gates and Hare. Those
I like
guys
Gates.
and they try to stand against the establishment, and they try to make changes, and they try to get rid of people that sabotage things, or they don't want to do actually the work they need to do. So I see her as a kind of like a Robin Hood, trying to go against the establishment that's so powerful that what do you really do? So I see her in the small ways, try to make a point and challenge things, and so I kind of like, what she's doing. What I kind of said about that, her and a few other people seem to be lone voice. They try to actually accomplish something, or actually do something for American people, because other people will not. She try to, they will, okay, let's give more money to Ukraine, let's go more money there, let's vote for Patriot Act, no problem. Let's just keep extending it, and none of those people, wants to make, change. And she is trying to make a change, but, she's in a broken system. She cannot get anywhere. So she looks kind of antagonistic, or she looks kind of like, like that.
I just don't,
she's trying to do that,
I don't perceive her as very refined, I think is what the issue is. And like, I look at like Matt Gaetz, and I think that is a very well articulated, well thought out. He has very scathing attacks, but he's not just doing it because he sees a moment to kind of like do a gotcha to someone. It's like, it's a lot more strategic and well thought out, in my opinion. She doesn't come off that way. And the reason that I brought all this up is because we were talking about like this impeachment thing. And that's another example of, I think there's a huge misunderstanding amongst at least a broad group of Republican voters about just how likely an impeachment proceeding would go our way in the sense that, like, I'm not a fucking Republican, but like in the way that, okay, we feel like Joe Biden has really done something that's broken the law. Let's try and get him impeached. I don't believe that it would be successful. I'm not saying that if you said, as the leader of the House, that we are going to move forward that it's not still worth pursuing, even if you don't think it will be successful. I'm not saying that. It may or may not be. That's a whole different conversation. But when people like Marjorie Taylor Greene come to Congress with big blown up versions of these checks and hold them in front of people and say, haha, see, proof. That's not proof. It's concerning. I think it's definitely indicative of something. I don't believe. I like the moniker, the Biden crime family, because I do believe at the heart of it, there's a lot of nepotism, misuse of government power, and all that kind of stuff. So this is not me defending them. But a blown up check that says loan repayment on it that arguably could actually be loan repayment. You're just pointing out how kind of wishy-washy the circumstances are, is not proof. That it's just one piece of many pieces of evidence that you might be able to bring forward to make a case, but it isn't it's not OJ's bloody gloves on him. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's the way it is presented to a huge part of the Republican voting base on conservative media, or by Marjorie Taylor Greene herself on her own YouTube channel and those kinds of things. So that's what I mean. Is like, I'm not defending the new speakers not bringing impeachment forward, but I would also like more information as to why, because you can't, both things can't be true. He can't be right about saying we don't quite have enough evidence, and Marjorie Taylor Greene be right by just printing out a big version of this check and holding it up in front of the camera saying, gotcha. Maybe that isn't evidence. So, just my 2 cents on it. I can't hear you for some reason.
I think the battery ran out on my microphone.
Okay,
I could hear some beeping, but I didn't know what it was. Now I know what it was.
There we go.
So anyway, I was talking about this. Remember the impeachment for Trump? They had no evidence, nothing. They had nothing really on him, and they'd still drag him through. Put him through a terrible thing. And I think, I don't even remember. Did they impeach him at the end?
They attempted to, but it didn't get through the Senate,
now.
I don't think.
Right. So they tried to do that on fraction of the evidence they had against the Biden.
Right.
And it was all political. And so, it would be kind of strange because they seem to be digging up more and more evidence about those dealings. And they haven't really even got everything. They just, subpoena, had the family to testify. So, we will see how more they dig into it, if more is going to come out of it.
All right. Well, Prometheus, say hello or goodbye to everybody. We'll see you guys next time.
All right.
And be sure to check into the next podcast for whatever random shit we say.